Good morning, Musa.
Good morning, Doc.
How are you doing?
By His grace, Alhamdulillah, we are doing very well.
Okay, you look kind of excited.
Oh, I'm more relaxed, not excited.
All right, so I've just seen your polling report for October. First of all, take us through the polling report. Is it new for this year? When is a polling report October? What does it mean? Has there been a certain sequence that you're following?
Yes, thank you very much. We've been doing this polling series for the past 2.5 years now, I would say. So we do this every 90 days. So if you look at every report that we have done in the past, you see January, you see April, you see July, and you see October. That is cycle of the polls that we've been doing since 2022. And this will be the last in the field as far as this year is concerned. So we will not go back to the field again this year, but we will do telephone polling between October and November to test the mood of the country again, to confirm if we're going to be seeing what we have just published in the polls.
Okay. So you started this in 2022, and you do it every other month?
Yes. No, 90 days.
Every 90 days?
Every 90 days, yes.
So the last one was in July?
Yes.
Okay.
Before this current one.
Can we do a quick recap of what the July one told us, and then we will now narrow down to the October one?
Right. If we quickly go back to July, in July, in the national poll, Mahama was on 51.1%, Bawumia on 38.2%, Alan on 5.3%, Bediako on 4.6%, and the rest were 0.8%. This was the July poll.
Okay. Now, I've seen your executive summary respect to the October poll, which you've told us is your final field poll. How is this different from July? What does this tell us? What are the major highlights about this? What should we watch out? Who are the biggest gainers? Who are the biggest losers? Who are static and not really moving?
Right. If you look at the current poll, John Mahama is largely flat on 51.15%, just plus 0.5% increase compared to July. Dr. Bawumia is on 37.25%, down 0.95%. Alan Chiramachen on 4.07%, down 1.23%. And Nana Kwame up to 6.23%, which is plus 1.63%. And the others were also up to 1.3%, that is plus 0.5%. So largely in terms of the gainers had been Mahama, Nana Kwame Bediako largely and extremely. Others, and then the losers were Alan Chiramachen, followed by Dr. Bawumia, in that order.
Now, what accounts for Nana Kwame Bediako's gain? It appears that is the biggest gainer.
Yes, you can see the story from the party affiliations of Nana Kwame Bediako. He increased his share of the vote among floating voters by 5% compared to July. And he increased his share of vote again among other party supporters by 12%. And then he increased his support among those who don't disclose their party affiliation by 4%. Now, those who don't disclose their party affiliation, they are largely MPP disgruntled voters.
Now, let's look at the issue of, I see that you have one part that deals with weighted, and the other that says unweighted.
Yes.
Explain that.
Now, the unweighted is the raw data that we take and then aggregate them and analyze them in that order without adjusting for anything. Now, when you do that, sometimes what you find is that you oversample MPP or undersample MPP or vice versa. So what you do then is that we have what we call our average polling data for party affiliation over the past almost 32 months. So we know the average number that should be MPP and average that should be NDC, average voting voters and average those who don't disclose. Now, when you go to the field and you oversample MPP, you then have to adjust the sample to reflect the national average. When you do that, that gives you the weighted average, the weighted polling numbers.
Now, when you look at your voters model, they're unweighted. JDM is on 49.3, DMB is on 35.9. You still insist that there will be no runoff?
No. One, because historically, from our polling data, JM has overperformed his polling numbers. Historically, by quite a bit margin. So if he's on the margin of 4.9%, and remember 3.5 said they are undecided. And when they do decide, they will break the way the race is looking. And in most cases, it breaks heavily towards the one who leads the race. So we expect that a bigger chunk of the 3.5 will go to Mahama. And that will put him on top of, or over the top, as the law requires.
Let's look at two things here. It's often been said, and it normally is said using the results of previous elections, that for NDC and MPP, they have their 45%. And it is the votes of floating voters and others who really will push them beyond the 50%. Now, in this polling, in terms of the basis of the key candidates, and of course the issue of apathy, where do we find these two? One, how are their bases responding, and what about the issue of apathy?
Now, let me start with the party affiliation and their voting intentions within the base. For those who say they are NDC and they are voting for Mahama, it is 96% of the base. And for those who said they are MPP and voting for Bawumia, it's 89%. So Bawumia is underperforming in his base compared to Mahama. Then you come to the floating voters. Now, this is where I think Bawumia has the biggest challenge. At the moment, 54% of floating voters are opting for John Mahama, compared to 21% for Bawumia. That is very, very huge gap. Now, another block of people we need to pay attention to are those we call the not disclosing party affiliation. Common council, they don't tell you which party they support. In the last poll, Mahama was on 41%, Bawumia 33%. Now, Mahama goes to 51%, and Bawumia dropped to 21%. That is plus of 10% for Mahama and a drop of 12% for Bawumia. These are, as I say, disgruntled MPP voters, and Bawumia is losing them in a very big way.
Now, let's look at first-time voters and to an extent also floating voters. I know that your poll also looked at this demography. What did you find out?
You know, interestingly, in the last poll, July poll, Mahama was almost neck and neck with Bawumia on the first-time voters. But this time around, I think the number has shifted. If you look at first-time voters, Mahama is now on 46%, Bawumia 38%, Alan 5%, and Bediako 10%, and 1% support the other candidates. But among the older voters, Mahama is 50%, Bawumia 40%, Alan 4%, Nanakwam Bediako 5%, and others 1%. So you can see that Mahama's lead among the older voters is much larger than his lead among first-time voters. And this can be attributed to the performance of Nanakwam Bediako, who gets about 10% now.
Now, Your poll, whilst I was looking through the report, I saw something that did a comparison with people who voted, for example, for Nana Akufo-Addo in the last election, and what their preference would be in this election. Enlighten us on that.
Right. I always say to people that if you want to see how the election will go, look at how the old guys voted last time. Simple as that. Because there are probably about 16.8 million of those people compared to 1.8 of new people. Among those who in 2020 went for Nana, 19% of them have switched camp to Mahama. 5% have switched camp to Alan Chiramatin. And 5% have switched camp to Nana Kwame. Only 70% of those who voted for Nana are voting for Bawumia. That is a drop of 30% of what Nana got. Now, if you look at Mahama's vote, he still gets 93% of those people that voted for him last time. He has lost 4% to Bawumia, 1 to Alan, and 1 to Nana Kwame. Now, we've done some analysis quickly in the swing regions, just to see whether there are any marked differences between the numbers in terms of the coalition of voters. For those who are voting for Mahama in the swing regions, Accra, Western, and Central region, Mahama is 54% in the swing regions. Bawumia 34%, 4% for Alan, 7% for Nana Kwame, and others 1%. But the critical hint lies in the coalition. What is the makeup of Mahama supporters, Bawumia supporters, Alan supporters, and Bediako supporters? 23% of people who were voting for or who are voting for Mahama now had earlier on voted for Nana in 2023. 23%. 92% of people voting for Bawumia went for Nana. Now look at this. 75% of Alan supporters had previously went for Nana. 62% of those who voted for Nana Kwame had previously went for Nana. It tells you that everybody is feeding for Nana's vote. And that is what the welcome news about.
Let's look at the part that deals with religion. I understand that you also did some polling amongst Christians and Muslims. What were the outcomes?
Right. I mean, these are the demography of people based on religion. In the same poll that we did, we asked them to identify themselves whether they are Muslims or Christians or traditionalists or others, or they have no religion. In the current poll, Christians, Mahama, 46%, Bawumia, 42%, Alan, 4%, Bediako, 7%, others 1%. Among the Muslims, Mahama, 59%, Bawumia, 33%, Alan, 4%, Bediako 4%, and others 1%. If you look at the traditional religion, Mahama 45%, Bawumia 40%, Alan 5%, Bediako 8%, others 3%. Those who belong to other religions, Mahama 55%, Bawumia 32%, Alan 4%, Nakam Bediako 7%, and others 3%. And those who have no religion, Mahama 48%, Bawumia 35%, 6% for Alan, 9% for Nana Kwame Bediako, and 1% for others.
Your poll suggests that between July and now, Dr. Bawumia has lost some votes amongst Muslims. Is that correct?
Yes, in fact, it is quite interesting. You could see, if you look at the Christian and the traditional religion, and this put this into context, Mahama gained 2.7% among the Muslims compared to July, and he lost 0.6% among traditional religion. Bawumia lost 3.5% of Muslims and gained 4.1% of traditional religion. I hope it rings a bell.
Wow. Okay. All right. Let's look at the I want us to look at two regions, Ashanti and Volta, and I'm choosing these two because they are the major strongholds of the two leading candidates. Ashanti and Volta. How did they perform as against July and, of course, as against what the party polled in the previous election?
You know, if you look at the Ashanti region, Compared to July, MPP, NDC remained largely flat, unchanged. Mahama on 22%, Bawumia on 66%. Alan dropped from 8% to 4%. Nana Kwambeda moved from 4% to 7%. So the gainers there in the region was purely Nana Kwambeda. Now, if you look at voter region that you just mentioned, in the voter region, Mahama largely remained flat. Last time it was 76, now 75. Bawumia also flat there. It was 14%, now 13%. And Alan remained flat. And Nana Kwambeda dropped by 1%. And the others gained 3%. So in the voter region, it's the new candidates that are attracting additional 3% of vote. Now, in terms of what MPP got last election, they got 70.something%. So if you look at what they are getting now, this is woefully behind that target, 70.0 or 70.6%, and also way behind their 85% target.
Now, the performance of these candidates, is it in tandem with the performance of their parliamentary candidates?
No, surprisingly, especially for Dr. Bawumia. In the 111 areas that we polled as part of this survey, we found that Mahama danced better than his parliamentary candidate in 56 constituencies, whereas in the other 55, the MPs are doing better than Mahama. But in the case of Bawumia, he danced better than his MPs in only 32 places. The MPs are polling him in 79 of the 111 constituencies. This is largely driven by the fact that you have Nana Kwambeda and Alan Martin breathing down his neck and taking votes from him, allowing the MPs to do better than him.
All right. Now, what were the major issues that influenced the decision of voters in this poll?
No, those issues have remained largely unchanged. It is economy, 70%,
70%.
job, 62%, 70% for economy,
okay,
62 for jobs, and 48 for education. These have been the top three issues since 2022, and they haven't changed. But then we did also ask them about other issues that will help them. I mean, other issues that will play a greater role in deciding who to vote for. For example, we asked them between the economy, the past performance of the party, the candidate's credibility, manifestos, galamsey, and other factors, which of them will play a greater influence on how they vote? And 55% of the respondents said economy. Their current economic condition will play a greater role. Then the past performance of the political parties, and then the credibility of the candidate, 34%, manifesto fourth, 28%, galamsey fifth, 9%, and other factors, 8%. So these are the things that are kind of influencing voters' behavior.
Now, Mussa, you've said that this is your last on-field work. Your final one will be through telephone. Are you going to come up with anything specific to the parliamentary elections?
Yes, what we are doing is that we are running what we call an MRP model, which tends to analyze the parliamentary elections on a case-by-case basis and assign probabilities to each of them depending upon what we have in form of data. So by 5th December, we will release all the 276 constituencies and which party is likely to win them.
5th of December?
Yes. We don't want to bring it early. It has to be late.
Okay. Now, what about your final telephone poll? When will you release that?
That should come in the middle of November. And that will be followed a week later with what we call our projections for the outcome. What we are releasing are entirely polling. We will put these polling numbers into a model that would calculate the probability of a candidate winning the election based on series of data that we have.
Okay.
So there will be a lot more work to be done between.
So I see that.
Sorry.
I see that in this particular poll, you've done what the October figures are, but I also realize that you've done an average over the period of your polling as well. Explain that and tell us what those figures are.
Right. You see, when it comes to opinion polls, if you rely on entirely the current polling number, you might be deceiving yourself, because in the period polling, there could be some noises that you may pick up that will not last for long. So the best thing we do as pollsters is to pick an average of the polls. That would remove any noises that you may see in the data. For example, what has been the spike or caused the spike of MPP voters in the field? Is there any reason that we need to know? And would that spike last? So in that polling for this month, you see a spike in that number, but that may not be exactly the average. So what we've done is that since January this year, we've taken all the polls we have done and then find the weighted average of those polls and say, okay, these are the average polling numbers that we have gathered over the period. And we believe that the final polling numbers without modeling will be around 5-3 for Mahama.
53.
So that I'm pretty confident.
Did you say 53?
Yes.
What about Dr. Bawumia?
We have to, at the moment, if you push me to the wall, I will cap him around 40% max.
Okay, so let me deal with this. For those who really do not know about global info analytics, for those who perhaps are watching us for the first time or seeing you speak for the first time, global info analytics, what kind of institution is it? What is your track record? What have you done as far as polling in this country is concerned?
Doc, we have been around as a company for the past 6 years. It was set up in March 2019, and we have polled several times before the 2020 elections. And indeed, our track record is there for everyone to see. If you go online, we predicted Nado was going to win by 50.4 plus or minus 1.9 margin of error. And since then, we've done polling in the MPP primaries, NDC primaries, and we know, the whole world knows, that we were the one that did a precision when it came to the MPP primaries. We gave 60.4%, and Bawumia got 61.3% also. So we were quite precise. And also, our track record on Eduso is there for everyone to see. So I think we will leave the world, the world to see what we have done. And I believe that on December 7th, the polls will pan out.
All right. Mussa Dankwah, thank you very much for joining me this morning, and hope to speak to you again when any issues arise out of this poll and subsequent ones. Thanks for your time.